I'm Martyn Ware. You may know me from such bands as the Human League and Heaven 17. But I have a company called Illustrious that from the year 2000, when I realized the record industry was going to hell in a handcart, I'm also a record producer as well. And I realized that the kind of work that I was getting offered back in 1999 was getting worse and worse. I thought I need to get back to how it was in the good old days, when I was inspired by the artistic interpretation of and the context of music, not just creating pop records or chasing the dollar or the pound, but actually doing it for artistic reasons. And so formed a company called Illustrious in the year 2000, where I became obsessed with immersive sound. And actually, in the room here today, everything you hear later on in particular will be in three-dimensional sound. There's 2 rings of speakers, 6 speakers, which creates a three-dimensional soundscape, which will, hopefully, we can move sounds through and around you. And this is a living embodiment of immersivity, correct? All right, so I wanted to talk about, when we were talking about the prep for this and looking at it from a sound point of view, because it's in the clues in the title of the event, I was very interested in how we could put this across to the audience, and obviously that's why the system's here. But also, the one big point that I always make when I talk about this is, I think it's about how you apply technology, and it's not about the technology. When things work best for me in terms of experiences for people, it's always when the content is really good, and actually the technology is secondary. I often say to people, if you can't afford a 3D sound system, I don't care. I know I'm not selling you anything. I want you to get the correct immersive experience for what you want. If you can only afford stereo, that's fine, or mono even. So it's not, this is my point. It's not about the technology. It's about what I call applied soundscaping. That's why I chose today not to do a visual representation of and show you projects, but to actually discuss with Stefan and ourselves about this particular thing. I just want to, as part of the summing up before we start discussing it, I just wanted to tell you the kind of areas that we've discovered over the last 17 years that are really important, a kind of state of the union, really. We do a lot of installations. It started off with art, so collaborating with visual artists and interactive artists, because sound is often the bridesmaid, and hopefully one day it will be the bride, but it's hard to say. We work with a lot, and our bread and butter is really working with interaction and immersive sound installations in museums and stuff like that. We do a lot of stuff with retail, which is kind of the dark arts as far as I'm concerned. But we all need to earn a living. I just want to just going to play you a piece. Are you ready, Asa? I just want to play you a piece before we go any further, which is a piece that we were commissioned to create for a big department store in Paris called Galeries Lafayette in their young fashion department. And we installed a 3D soundscape capability in their shop. And it was to create, the brief was to embody the spirit of the Pigalle, which is obviously the red light district, from the 1920s up to the current day. So we did a kind of mashup of different styles of music from then right up to the current day, where there's lots of nightclubs there now. So just to show you the capability of the system and to show you the kind of weird shit we get involved with, excuse my language, if you wouldn't mind playing it now.
Vous avez pas vu ma brosse à dents?
Super génial, trop top, inouï, trop beau, groovy, trop frais, cheesy, classieux, stylé, ok, funky, trop drôle, samedi, trop cool, extra sympa, puissant, dément, piscine, villa, champagne, taxi, hi-fi, Dolby, botox, glamour, sexy, crazy.
T'es trop VIP. T'es trop VIP.
C'est parti de la jet set.
Alors tout le monde, nous allons jouer le jeu de Toc Toc.
Pourquoi que t'as pris mon oreiller? Pourquoi que t'as pris mes beaux souliers, mon pain, mon vin et ma petite sœur pour la faire mendier? J'ai le cœur.
The idea was, at the start there, I don't know if you realise, but it's not very high, this ceiling, but the room fills up with champagne bubbles. And you hear, we created an imaginary catwalk down the centre of the room where you could hear people doing the catwalk thing. And then there was photographers going off all over the place as though you were the star of the show when you walked into the young fashion department. And then there's a bit of time travel and different things all mashed up together. Strange old job, isn't it? But just an example of that. So we do a lot of urban installations on a very large scale. We did the whole of the Millennium Bridge for 8 weeks, which played to 4 million people, based around the history of the Thames. That was during the Olympics in 2012, and we also deliver stuff via the internet in binaural via headphones. Although, as Fred was discussing. We prefer the communal experience, so therefore I find headphones to isolate people from experiences, so much keener on gathering people together and playing them things in a huge urban environment. We also work on things like on all kinds of communal experiences, particularly education and also things like wayfinding for like events and festivals, etc. Using sound as a way of moving people around space is quite an interesting concept. But there's so many different applications, and what I encourage people to think about for themselves is how the movement of sound in space, we all listen to the world in 3D all the time, can be used in a creative way. It's not just about the content, it's also about the fact we can actually move that content and create an illusory world or a faux real world for people. And I know that you're involved in three-dimensional sound as well. Do you want to explain how?
Thanks, Martin. I don't know how to follow that. I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. So I started off as a musician. I come from a classical family, but ditched that soon for more modern music, and then ventured into sound technology after I studied, specialized in post-production, released some feature films. So I was kind of, by 2003, I was mixing in 5.1. Together with my colleague Gary as well, we explored. We looked at what we could do with those 5 speakers that we had, rather than sticking to the film standard, which was very restrictive. That's kind of where our journey really started, thinking about immersive. And a couple of studios later, a couple of projects later, 5 years ago, I started to really be interested in ambisonics and what 3D sound means. And we also explored binauralization of ambisonics and also building larger scale arrays. And for the last 3 years, we've been in FACT in Liverpool, which is an arts center. We've been based in there and predominantly collaborated with artists in different genres to really explore how we can get the most of our technology that we've been developing. So pretty much in the first 3 artists that we worked with, they have buttons on the interface that we've developed to to make it easier for them to understand the medium. And one of the things, I can only echo what you said about the art having to come first and not the technology. We found that a lot of, especially VR projects or 3D audio projects, are led by technologists. And even though I patched those plugins together, I prefer to step back and let the artist then direct the process. But one of the things that I found really interesting in working with artists that have maybe come from 5.1 is that they are very much in the mindset, and most sound technologists as well, where is the speaker? This is where my sound is coming from. And the thing that I always start with artists is telling them, have you seen the Matrix, the spoon thing? Forget the speaker. There is no speaker.
Yes.
There is an angle. When we walk around our real reality, we don't think of a sound source being a speaker. It is coming from a location. So the sooner you let go of the physicality of the speaker and think about angles, I think you're really thinking about space.
Wow. Okay. And so the uses of three-dimensional sound. Can you give us some examples of your experience of this? I mean, obviously, I've been doing this for a long time now, but you may have some new insights on this.
Well, I found it interesting. We worked with a composer called Philip Jack. He's in the electronic domain, and for him,
what's unique about the immersivity we're talking about with ambisonics, as opposed to just stereo, for instance, or quadraphonic?
Well, I think what's special about it is that the sound can really envelop you, and you can create a sound field which can cover a much larger area than a 5.1 system can. So you can immerse more people simultaneously, they can have a shared experience, but you also give the artists much more granular tools to influence and invoke a different scene. One of the things that we found is that perceptive time seems to pass differently in immersive. So the first couple of tracks we wrote were 5, 6, 7 minutes long. And we played it to people and they said, oh, that's a nice 3-minute piece. Yeah. Because they forgot about how regular time passes. And so one of the things that we found when artists collaborated with us is to make them aware early about that, because they might need to prepare their content differently. So I'm not a fan of taking existing content and just porting it into an immersive, but I encourage rewriting it because of this time
It's
element.
actually, I mean, having produced records for nigh on 40 years and written and been a writer for that period and composer, it's actually changed the way that I compose music now and mix music. I find that very interesting. Also, one thing I would point out is we've done quite a lot of stuff for museums, as I mentioned. And what we realise now is if you judge, say, sound levels and immersivity and correctly within a gallery environment, people feel like they're not alone anymore. And so when they enter the space as, say, a group of 2 or 3 people, instead of just standing there with their arms behind their backs looking like Prince Philip going around a boring exhibition, they're actually conversing with each other because the place feels full of ghosts, spirits. This is a really important thing in terms of communal experience, I believe. So everybody goes, oh, right, we're at a rock concert and there's, we're at Glastonbury, there's 50,000 people, everybody's cheering, or you're at a football match. This is really powerful stuff, but also on a micro level, the idea of having a few people that feel, even though they're strangers, that they feel more like communicating is a very powerful thing that is much more engendered by immersivity, in my view, than just having a little bit of background music or something. I think that's really important, because I believe in a world where we live in a more atomized society. We spend all our days looking at these things, looking at a computer screen, looking at, and we go home and we do the same thing, but a lot of people work at that all day. I think people really have an innate desire for communal activity. That's why everybody spends an absolute fortune going to see, some comedian at the O2, spends 75 quid to watch somebody on a screen like half a mile away. It's not because they particularly like that. They probably wouldn't spend as much money if they were in a pub 3 meters away. It's really interesting. So they want in a secular society, this is the new religion, I believe. And so we need to provide that sense of fulfillment. What do you think, Fred? I need your opinion on this.
Sure, well, I think you're bang on it. Anytime anyone says this is the new religion, I'm always up for signing up. But Stefan, you've got some work here, is that right?
Yeah, I've brought a piece along from a composer that we worked with, Patrick Deneen. This was a piece for the Unity Theatre in Liverpool. It was for their Panto season, but they had an immersive space to go, so the adults would have some entertainment too. And we created, it was, the theme was dark wood. So there's obviously a little bit of Peter and the Wolf creeping in. And so the composer came in, we explained our software and our visual approach to mixing, and we prepped him to elongate his parts and pre-think the composition through, and then we mixed it with him. So it's a 3-minute piece. If you could play it, if you could play the piece. So the story is we are in the wolf's cave, and we're taking a stroll into the forest, where we encounter some musical instruments. And yeah, it is. Yeah, behind you. Hopefully it plays.
And we're up here, so we didn't get the full Monty, but looking down there, I could see more than one of you with your eyes shut, and I think that was a real indication of how powerful this work can be when it's in this kind of context. Guys, that is all we've got time for. We're rattling through it, but just thank you so much. That was really enlightening, and I'm sure that anyone who has further questions will come and buttonhole you during the break. Stefan, you want to say something?
Can I just say, if you want to experience that piece again, we have the visualization over at our stand, so you can see how we objectified everything
Right. So a how-to presentation is available on a one-to-one basis from your stand.
Exactly.
Fantastic. And Martyn?
I just want to say one thing we noticed when we did the Tales from the Bridge piece on the Millennium Bridge was when we were testing the piece, as soon as we switched the immersive soundscape on, people started taking more photographs. And I just want you to think about that.
That is a mind-blower. Okay, brilliant. More selfies, more immersion. Excellent. Thank you very much, Martyn and Stefan.